It's always really interesting to me to see two pokey parents fighting it out. If you're a fan of that sort of thing, then round 3 might have the match for you. You've got Steve Harris and his Ice Rider Calyrex, and we've got Matt Williams with the single prize Malamar. Let's look at some decks. Here we have Steve's Ice Rider Calyrex list. Now we did see a Ice Rider list in round 1 with Josh, but this list is a little bit different to that. It's choosing to run a secondary attacker in the Suicune V. Suicune V has 210 HP, and its Blizzard Rondo attack for a water and a colorless energy does 20 damage plus 20 more for each Pokemon on both benches. In some cases this damage can add up to about 180, 200 and 220 pretty quickly, especially in a metagame where a lot of people are running things like Genesect and Drizzile as consistency engines. Now of course this doesn't take away from the fact that in a lot of matchups Steve just wants to be punching really hard with that Ice Rider Calyrex V. Now just like we saw with Josh, Steve makes this happen with his Melanie and his water energies. He also has Capacious Bucket to get those water energies out of the deck, and ideally Steve just wants to Melanie every turn onto one of his attackers and just start swinging with that Max Lance or the Blizzard Rondo. There's not too much different here from Steve's list to Josh's list, but Steve is running some pretty interesting cards here. He is running 4 of the Cross Switcher card from Fusion Strike. Cross Switcher is a Fusion Strike trainer card that lets you bring up a Pokemon from your opponent's bench in the same way that Boss's Orders does. However, you also get to switch a Pokemon. Now this is reminiscent of Guzma from many years ago. In Steve's case, and in a lot of cases where Ice Rider decks are running the Cross Switcher, you run it because there are a lot of turns, especially in the late game, where you want to Melanie onto an attacker and Boss's Orders in the same turn. Now obviously you can't do both, so Cross Switcher finds a way around this. Cross Switcher you need to play 2 copies of in order to get the effect, but with the Drizziles and the Inteleon this isn't too hard to do. And with Suicune and Melanie drawing you cards, you can often find your way into one Cross Switcher and just shady dealings your way into the other. Steve is also running Air Balloon and Switch. This is to make it so that when you Cross Switcher your attacker onto the bench, you have a way of getting it back. Steve is running 1 Fan of Waves and 1 Tool Scrapper. This is a little bit different to what we're used to seeing from Ice Rider lists. Fan of Waves is obviously a very popular tech card at the moment in decks because Special Energy is running absolutely rampant, and having a way to slow down your opponents who use it is very handy. Tool Scrapper stops things like Air Balloon and Tool Jammer, and in some cases Tool Scrapper is just a fun option to stop things like Air Balloon and in some cases Tool Scrapper. Up next we have Matt's list. Matt is playing the Rapidstrike Malamar. Now the Rapidstrike Malamar is an interesting choice of deck for today. Matt is running no V or VMAX Pokemon. Every single Pokemon in his deck, from the attacking Malamars to the supporting Cinccino and Octillery, are single prize Pokemon, meaning that in a lot of cases Matt's opponents are going to have to take 6 knockouts to win the game. Now this might work in Matt's favor in some cases, as a lot of decks are not engineered to really play very long games. They're sort of built to slowly get things on board and then eventually start slugging for big damage against opposing Vs and VMAXs. Matt, however, has chosen to play the Rapidstrike Malamar. Rapidstrike Malamar's Rapidstrike Tentacles, doing 40 damage for each Rapidstrike card in your hand that you reveal and shuffle back into your deck. Now, as we can see, Matt is running quite a lot of Rapidstrike cards in his deck, so he'll have plenty of opportunities throughout the match to hit for numbers as high as 280 or even 320 in some cases. Now, Matt is running a lot of search cards in this deck. The Evolution Incense, Level Ball, Great Ball, and Fog Crystal are all being run at 4 copies here. Obviously, these cards let you get into your Pokemon. Cinccino is searchable with Level Ball, Inkay is searchable with the Fog Crystal, as well as the 2 copies of basic Psychic Energy Matt is running, and Evolution Incense grabs you pretty much everything from Malamar to Octillery to Cinccino. Now the Octillery is also useful with its Rapid Strike search ability. It lets you take things like Malamar, these 4 copies of Spiral Energy, and if you need it you can grab your copies of Karina's Focus. Now for the most part Octillery is just going to be fueling up your hands for those Rapid Strike tentacle attacks. the additional Rapidstrike card you get from that can often put you over the line in some cases with the damage. Now Matt is running sort of a slower supporter line than we're used to. He's running the 4 copies of Bruno and 4 copies of Karina's Focus. Now these aren't quite as potent as Professor's Research or even cards like Marnie in terms of how disruptive they can be, but they are a bit more suited to a single prize deck, particularly one that's running a whole lot of Rapidstrike cards. Matt could only really find the room to run 1 Boss's Orders here. You might have to discard that card at some point, especially if you're running Professor's Research, so Matt choosing not to run that and just saving that Boss's Orders for when he really needs it. He may struggle to sort of close out games if he only has access to 1 copy of Boss's Orders, but I suppose we'll see. Let's get into some games. Here we have the players setting up for game 1. Steve is on the left with the no playmat, and Matt is on the right. Matt is mulliganing pretty early. Matt is running 10 basics in this deck. He's running the 4 Inkay, the 3 Remoraid, and the 3 Minccino in the deck. Steve has 2 basics ready. This might be the Sobble and the Ice Rider. I didn't quite catch what he put down there, but we will know soon enough. Matt offers the cut, Steve declines, and he gets his new hand of 7 cards. There is an Inkay in hand. There's also the Minccino, so we will be underway in this round 3 match. Steve takes his mulligan. Matt sets up his prizes. Very neat rectangle 2x3. Steve has his ideal starter in that Suicune. He'll be able to draw an additional card with that fleet-footed, which he immediately does. So after the mulligan and the draw for turn, Steve has not done too bad. He's gotten additional cards already. Steve is quick balling away that Fan of Waves. Fan of Waves will pretty much not be very useful in this match at all. Matt's Malamar attack for 1 energy. Although Matt does run the Spiral energy, it really doesn't matter if you put them on the bottom of the deck, especially if Matt can find his way into Octillery early. He'll just have a way to search those out, so not a very impactful card in this matchup. Steve just wants to throw that away and get some Sobble set up. He gets energy on that Suicune, so that Suicune could very well be attacking by next turn. And in Steve's case, Suicune is going to be taking a knockout nearly every time he announces Blizzard Rondo, as Matt is going to want a full bench of support Pokemon and Inkays on deck to attack with. So Steve will have little trouble hitting the magic number of 120 in this matchup. Now Matt's setup isn't too bad so far. He has a couple of Minccino in play already. He has an Inkay in the active. He will most likely need to get another Inkay down, which he goes for with that level ball. Really wants to be getting his own attackers set up as soon as possible. Matt is forcing Steve to take 6 knockouts here, but I mean, he's pretty much immediately on the clock once that Suicune is set up, so he needs to value getting that setup going as soon as possible. Matt's hand is looking a little bit rough here. He does have energy and Evolution Incense for next turn, but he is missing his supporters here. The Ordinary Rod and the Rescue Carrier are very rough cards to be having in your opening hand. They are basically completely bricked at the start of the game. You really want to find those cards once the game's gone on for a bit and use them to replenish your Pokemon back into the deck. Action is back on Steve now, and he wastes no time in getting that second energy on the Suicune. So this turn will be ending with a Blizzard Rondo for a knockout. Gets a Drizzle into play too. Steve might also want to start looking into getting a backup attacker set up on the board. From what we can see of Matt's hand, it doesn't seem too likely that he's going to get to that 210 number to knock out the Suicune, but obviously Steve has to play the long game here just as much as Matt does, and probably wants to get something like an Ice Rider or perhaps his other Suicune into play, just so he can get things going a bit. Now, Steve gets the other Drizzle into play too. One thing to remember here is that Steve is running the 2 copies of the Chilling Reign Quick Shooting Inteleon. Now this Inteleon does have that quick shooting ability, which lets you put 2 damage counters onto a Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field. These can very quickly add up in a matchup like this. These Inkays can only take 3 quick shootings before they fall, so puts a little bit of additional pressure on Matt to get those evolved. Matt uses his Evolution Incense, grabs a Chinchino here. That Make Do ability will discard a card from his hand and allow him to draw 2. This will be Matt's way of trying to draw into something, because his hand still isn't great. He does have that Spiral energy, but even if he draws Malamar, he's not going to be swinging very hard unless he can get a significantly better hand with this Rapid Strike attack. Goes with that Rescue Carrier, gets the Inkay into play. So the Make Do hasn't gotten him too much here, but he does have that Octillery for next turn. That Octillery will allow him to take something like a Karina's Focus. That'll let him draw up to 6 cards, and hopefully from there he'll be able to get a good attack going. Now, Matt's starting to look desperate already. That is his only boss's orders in the deck, and he has used it to maybe buy himself a turn. If Steve can't retreat the Drizzile, it will have gotten some good value, but if not, he's spent a boss's orders just to move a Drizzile to the active. And we see the cross switcher, the double cross switcher is played. Steve targets down that Remoraid. Absolute worst card Matt wants to see here is that double cross switcher. And Steve is popping off here. He is setting up the Inteleon on the bench. That Shady Dealings Inteleon has the Aqua Bullet attack. While a lot of decks play the Inteleon for the ability to grab cards out of your deck, if you are running Water Energy, that Aqua Bullet is quite useful. 120 damage plus 20 damage to a bench Pokemon. Absolutely nothing to sneeze at. And with its 160 HP, Matt will need to pull off a really strong Rapid Strike Tentacles to knock it out. He will need to shuffle 4 Rapid Strike Pokemon back into his deck. And this is just to take 1 prize, so it looks like Steve has responded to Matt playing a 1 prize deck saying, hey, I can do this too. Matt goes to the Blizzard Rondo, and just like that, he's down to 4 prizes. So we see the Inteleon ping go to that bench Chinchino. Chinchino has 90 HP, so obviously it is 70 health away from getting knocked out here. Matt Make Do's away the Octillery here, showing to Steve, hey, I had it, you killed my guy. So Malamar is set up on the bench, but Steve doesn't have the opportunity to take something like a supporter card out of his deck to keep his combo going. Matt is sputtering here. And Steve is just going in here. He's found another boss's orders. It's much less cool than the cross switcher play, but yeah, the Blizzard Rondo will take out this Malamar as well. He is just steamrolling these single prize Pokemon. He even puts the damage counters on the Cinccino, so that Cinccino is starting to get a little bit more damage now. An Aqua Bullet will be able to finish it off in a later turn, especially if Steve can keep up the pressure with this, with the quick shooting Inteleon. He does scoop it up back into hand, but that Drizzile is ready to evolve into it next turn. Matt plays the Great Ball here. He's trying to get something going, anything at all going. Finds the Malamar. That might be a way to at least get an attack this turn, but he'll need the Cinccino's make do to be pretty nice to him, and from what we've seen so far today, it has not been that nice. Chucks a Spiral Energy. He does draw into the Cinccino. Oh, perfect hand from Matt here. He has the attacker set up. He gets the Karina for the full 6. He still has a make do. Benches the Malamar. He decides against it. I might have decided against that too. He needs he will need 6 Rapidstrike cards in his hand, and for all those to be shuffled back. Given his hand is just 6 cards now, I'm not loving his chances, but he at least has a chance to do some good damage here with this Malamar. Might set that Suicune up for a knockout in a later turn. Steve, however, is already down to 3 prizes, so that Cinccino on the bench is already heavily damaged, so it might only take another 2 attacks from Steve to close this game 1 out. Matt doing a quick count of his hand. I don't think he can quite make it. I think he realizes that too, but it looks like he can... Oh, he does have the Evolution Incenses in hand. He has the Level Ball as well, so he can at least take that and fill his hand up with another Rapid Strike Pokemon. Depending on some circumstances, I might consider benching that Remoraid. Matt agrees here and benches it. Should he find the Octillery in a later turn, that will at least get him some of the consistency he's been really lacking in this game 1 so far. Matt drops double Evolution Incense, grabbing the Octillery and the Malamar. In Matt's, if I was sitting where Matt was, I might have saved just one of those Evolution Incense for next turn. Because he'll need a backup attacker and Octillery and energy in hand to keep this pressure up next turn, so I might have just held on to one of those, but doing 120 damage is quite good in this case. It's a 2-hit knockout on the Suicune. Steve is continuing to harass that Cinccino on the bench. It is now up to 60 damage. He will be able to finish it off next turn with the Aqua Bullet, so he's putting Matt on a 2-turn clock here. Obviously this Blizzard Rondo will take care of that Malamar in the active, and next turn he'll be able to go for a quick shooting and an Aqua Bullet onto whatever's in the active to put the 20 on that bench Cinccino and just wrap up this game 1 here. If I were Matt, I would consider saving some time going into a game 2 and 3, but I'm sure it's also good to just play this one out and get an idea of what's going on. Matt has that Bruno supporter. Now the Bruno lets you shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 4 cards. However, if one of your Pokemon was knocked out last turn, you get to... Yeah, so Matt realizes that this isn't exactly winnable from here. Steve has game quite literally on board, so Matt is saying, let's go to game 2. There's plenty of time left in the round. I'm a slower deck, so I need the time to set up and get my attackers going, and I probably need every minute of this 50 minutes to close out a game 3 if it gets to that. So good call by Matt there, I think. Just saving that time and heading into a game 2. But yeah, back to the Bruno. The Bruno lets you draw 7 cards if one of your Pokemon was knocked out, and it's a strong supporter for these single prize decks. Obviously, in a VMAX deck, any individual knockout you take is fairly devastating, as usually that's 2 or 3 prizes. But in Matt's case, it's not so bad to lose a single prize. You generally have a bit more time to get your game plan going, and being able to shuffle up and draw a fresh set of 7 cards is quite strong. It's just about as strong as Professor's Research, but in Matt's case, he doesn't have to discard his hand, and a lot of times discarding your hand with these single prize decks is very awkward. You have to lose a lot of very valuable pieces. Both players have active Pokemon. Steve's setting up his prize cards. Matt is going first in this game too. Shinchino is active. Inkay is on the bench, and Matt's hand's looking okay. He's got the level ball in hand. He can grab something like a Remoraid or another Inkay. Depending on what's in his hand, I'd probably grab the Remoraid, just as getting that search every turn is very important. Matt grabs the Remoraid, so we'll see that one come down, and hopefully stick around a bit longer than the Remoraid in game 1, and maybe that'll give Matt just a little bit more consistency in his draw. We know he was quite lacking in that in game 1. Matt's Great Ball finds him an Inkay here, so Matt will get an additional attacker set up on the board. Matt's looking a lot stronger compared to game 1 here. He has energy in hand too. I'd probably hold on to that energy. You're not super desperate to get attachments on board here. I think Matt agrees, so he just passes and lets Steve get going on his first turn as well. Now Steve's hand's not bad either. He has the Quick Ball, throwing away the Ice Rider Calyrex with that. But I also did see an Ice Rider in his hand and another Sobble as well, so Steve's consistency engine will be going just fine here in this game 2. Now Steve could get a knockout here on this turn 1. He would probably need a lot of cards to go his way, but a Melanie onto a Suicune along with an attachment and something like a Cross Switcher. Again, that's asking quite a lot. He doesn't quite get there, he just benches 2 of his pieces and passes. Steve has 3 Sobble in play, so the Shady Dealings Drizziles, once they come down, will be getting very good value here. Matt is getting set up quite well too though. He does have the Chinchino already. He's thinking of what to do next. He has Bruno and Karina in hand. Those can both be his supporter for turn. However, Bruno would only be drawing him 4 cards in this instance. Yeah, so he attaches to the Chinchino here. Chinchino is not exactly your best starter in this deck, especially when you're not running quite as many switching outs. So sometimes you will just have to attach to it and go for an energy assist for 40. I think that is what we will be seeing Matt end his turn with. He does get the Octillery into play. You can get a bit more cards going here. Thinking of going for that Malamar. Just getting an attacker ready. Obviously he has a bit more time on his side here. Steve didn't get an energy turn 1, so disregarding something like a crazy cross-switcher play, that Malamar will be safe on the bench, as will the Octillery and Inkay. So Matt is more than happy to just solidify his position here, get the Malamars on the board. He's got another Inkay in hand, but he might want to hold on to that just to juice up those Rapidstrike Tentacle attacks for later turns in the game. And we see the energy assist for 40. I don't know if it will help, but it's obviously preferable to just saying pass. Now, Steve's hand is interesting. It is 3 Melanie. You don't get any bonus for 3 Melanie. It's just kind of a brick if you don't have energy in the discard. However, Steve does retreat that Sobble onto the bench, effectively discarding the water energy and making it a target for the Melanie. So he at least gets some energy onto that Ice Rider, getting it ready to start attacking once he can evolve it into Ice Rider, and of course get another energy onto it. No Drizzle from Steve, so his setup's going a lot slower than it was in that game 1. Meanwhile, Matt is kind of thriving here. He's continuing to get his board going. He has that Rapidstrike Malamar ready to attack. He will only need 2 Rapidstrike Pokemon to get the knockout here on this Sobble. Matt has a much riskier play he could go for here. He would need... he'd probably need this Make Do to draw in 3 cards, which you can't really do, so... Matt is pondering it, however. Actually, I might have miscounted. If this Make Do draws him into 2 Rapid Strike cards, he can Rapid Strike search for a 3rd card. He can then retreat the Chinchino and then boss up that Ice Rider. Really, three Bruno in play when your opponent isn't taking knockouts is quite brutal. So obviously those were not the Rapid Strike cards he was after. It's something of a shame that the Rapid Strike Tentacles can't use the Single Strike cards, which Bruno's happen to be. Now Matt is going for the Bruno for 4. You're not crazy about it, but maybe this gets him into something. There are 3 Rapid Strike cards. That's not quite bad. So if Matt wants it, there's a knockout waiting for him at the end of this turn. There's Rapid Strike Search. Just taking a supporter out of the deck. This way Matt will not have to shuffle. Well, Matt can shuffle back the 2 Pokemon and keep the support for next turn. Looks like he's eyeing up the Octillery and the Tower of Waters. So, nearly discards them, remembers to shuffle them. The deck wouldn't be quite as good if you had to discard them, so... yeah, he shuffles those back into the deck. It is now Steve's turn again. Remember that Steve still has those Melanies in hand, so probably has the opportunity to get a knockout in return here, as long as the cards are favourable enough that he can draw into a Ice Rider VMAX somehow. So there's the Melanie. What will he get from the Melanie? I see 3 Pokemon. I see a Drizzile. So that Drizzile can get Steve an Evolution Incense here, which of course can grab him the Ice Rider VMAX. The VMAX can knock out this Malamar with the Max Lance, discarding 1 energy. Rider the High King will not quite do enough here. It will only do 100 as Matt has 3 bench Pokemon. But after Steve's slow start, he's starting to claw his way back into this just a little bit. So there's a Capacious Bucket. Steve just wants to get those water energies out of his deck. He's not yet attached return, so he can do that to that Suicune. Suicune obviously also a very consistent attacker here. Steve, doing a little math, realizes he has to throw away a water energy here. That's quite alright though, as he has one in hand and he still has, I believe, at least one Melanie in his hand. He also knocks out Matt's best attacker on board right now, and Matt's going to have to invest some of his Rapidstrike cards into getting another attacker. Now, obviously that's not a huge deal, especially with the Make Do and the Octillery in play, but he won't be attacking for quite as much as he could have if he didn't have to put the Spiral Energy and the Malamar into play. Matt also needs to get Inkay in play here. He has to stream attackers. That's one of the downsides to running these single prizer decks, is you need to keep a consistent stream of attackers going, especially if you rely on evolving attackers, as Matt does here. So we see a Remoraid come down. Currently Matt is not doing anything as he doesn't have an energy in play, but were he to find one with that Rapid Strike Surge ability, he would only be doing 80, as his only Rapid Strike cards in hand are those two Tower of Waters. I believe we'll be seeing an Inkay here, yes. So Matt realizes he has to get another attacker in play, but he also needs energy, and I'm having a hard time seeing how he can do that unless he gets fairly lucky with his Make Do here. He has to throw away a Tower of Waters here. That's another resource gone. He does draw into that Bruno though, but keep in mind he's already played Karina's Focus for his turn. So yeah, after Matt's great start, he's started to stall out just a little bit again. Meanwhile, Steve is rolling at the moment with his attackers in play. Each player's only given up one prize though, so it's still quite early in the game. Matt benches the Inkay and pushes the Remoraid forward. He's saying quite explicitly to Steve, hey, I need another turn here, just take this Remoraid if you need. Steve has quite a hand going. He does have the cross switcher if he needs it, but at this point he doesn't really need it. He's content to just knock out whatever sits in front of him, and now that Matt has benched a fourth Pokemon, he doesn't even need to discard energy from Max Lance. He can just go for the Ride of the High King and do 130 damage. Steve gets another Sobble on board. He is eyeing up that cross switcher, so he will take down that Octillery. That is slightly preferable to just knocking out a Remoraid in this instance. You do cut off Matt's ability to search. However, it does force up that Suicune, and the Suicune is a bit softer than the Ice Rider Calyrex here. Matt is probably happier to try and get 6 Rapid Strike cards in hand this turn and use the momentum from that attack and the prize cards he gets to go for an 8-card Rapid Strike Tentacles on the following turn. That could be his way to get those 5 prizes he has left. So Steve knocks out an important part of Matt's engine here, but Matt now has to hit for a much lower number than he would have. So Matt top decks that Spiral Energy. He has the Evolution Incense in hand. He can immediately grab that Octillery. Matt runs 3 copies of the Octillery, so it's a lot harder to run out of Octillery in this deck than in another deck such as Urshifu, which typically only plays 2. Now there's the Bruno. Now that's the card you want to see, much more than Karina in this situation. Now Bruno gets you an additional card, and also you're not using one of your Rapid Strike cards, so you're more likely to get a much bigger hand full of Rapid Strike cards. Matt has also not used his Make Do for turn, or his Rapid Strike Tentacles, so he has the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper here, and remember, if he can get to 6 Rapid Strike cards in hand, he can take the knockout on this Suicune and go down to 3 prizes. It looks like he probably has enough cards to make it here. He has that Rescue Carrier, letting him grab 2 Pokemon with less than 90 HP from his discard pile. So that will do very well to fuel his Rapid Strike Tentacles here, putting 2 Rapid Strike cards back into his hand. Here comes the Level Ball. And there's a Remoraid at the bottom of the deck. Opts to grab the Inkay instead, however. Given that he's probably just shuffling these back at the end of the turn, it's not too important which one he does. Now he also has 2 Fog Crystal in hand. These Fog Crystal could also grab the Inkay, so I guess I'd take that back about the Level Ball. You probably want to be Level Balling for Remoraid and Fog Crystalling for Inkay if you're trying to maximize your damage. I think Matt has this though, so it's not too big of a deal, the order of operations here. Not on this turn at least. He's probably going to have to work a lot harder to get something like an 8-card knockout on the next turn. So Matt goes in with that Evolution Incense. He grabs the Malamar and the Brawly. The Brawly is a one-of supporter, which lets you put 3 Rapid Strike Pokemon in your hand. And that can be quite useful in the case of a slow setup, and it also has that Rapid Strike tag, so Matt is going for the Make Do, probably a little later than I'd like. I think you should be going for the Make Do before you start using your search cards, like your Evolution Incense and your Rapid Strike Search, but Matt is laying down his cards. He's indicating to us that he has the 6 Rapid Strike cards necessary for a Rapid Tentacles knockout here. So there it is. That is the second Rapid Strike Tentacles of this match, and it knocked out a 2 prizer. So it just goes to show that once this deck gets set up, really gets rolling, it can take these knockouts and win the prize trade against some of these 2 and 3 prize attackers in the metagame. So yeah, if the one prizer was easy mode and that Suicune was sort of medium, we're getting into hard mode now. Okay, warped into the future a little bit, but we've had another little camera stuff up here, but it's okay. Much more on top of it this time. Both the plays have stopped, and we've not lost any gameplay here, so all is good. Steve is quick balling, getting a Ice Rider into play. Steve is not quite as fortunate in game 1 as to get his Shady Dealings Inteleon set up. If he could start attacking with that, it would put Matt in a really awkward position, but for now, to keep up offensive pressure and continue attacking, he has to attack with this Ice Rider. The Marnie he's just played certainly helps though. Steve runs 1 copy of Marnie in this deck, and yeah, setting your opponent to a hand of 4 cards and knocking out their main attacker means that it's going to be very difficult for Matt here to get to that miracle 8 Rapid Strike Pokemon knockout. He does have the 2 Fog Crystal in hand, so his energy needs will be met this turn, assuming that it's still in deck. I believe I see it there in the middle of the deck. No, he's going for the Inkay, I believe. No, there's the Psychic Energy. The energy will be a little bit harder to find than the Rapidstrike Pokemon and the cards, so obviously if you can, you want to take out that Psychic Energy, so it doesn't have the Rapidstrike tag, it's just basic energy. Matt does play another Fog Crystal anyway, so he gets the Inkay as well, gets that set up for a later turn. I think Matt's best idea here is just to be conservative and try and go for the 2-shot on this Ice Rider. I believe Matt still has Boss's Orders in deck as well, so he can chase down that Ice Rider and knock it out on a later turn, even if he doesn't quite get the knockout this turn. That is a strong Karina's focus here. He draws into a bunch of purple cards. He goes for the Make Do. Now, I think it'll be... Oh, he has the Scoop Up Net. That Scoop Up Net could mean trouble. That Scoop Up Net means something like that Octillery could go back to hand. That boosts Matt's number of Rapidstrike cards in hand by 2, obviously. I don't know if it would be enough to get the knockout, but looks like he has about 4 in hand, I believe. They all seem to be Pokemon. He also has an Evolution Incense, and I believe a Mangino. So I think at his very best he would be about 40 damage short here. So I think if you're Matt, you just want to take about 160 damage here and try and follow that up with 160 damage next turn. He's eyeing it up. There it is. So Rapidstrike Tentacles will do 160. Ice Rider Calyrex has 320 HP, so another 160 will get the job done here for Matt in this game 2. Now, Steve is not piling the damage on this Cinccino quite like he did in game 1, so I believe Matt will still have at least another 2 turns to close this one out. But there is the Air Balloon. So this Ice Rider will be safe from harm on the bench as long as Matt doesn't find his way into his only copy of Boss's Orders here. And here we see the Shady Dealings Inteleon. Obviously Steve could start attacking with that, and that most likely would put Matt on the 1-turn timer here. There's the Boss's Orders. Obviously he's Melanied this turn, so he can't play that, but he realizes that Matt doesn't run any hand disruption in his deck, no cards like Marnie, so anything you search for is pretty much safe in your hand. There's not a whole lot your opponent can do. So when you're playing decks like that and you have the security to just know that whatever you put in your hand is safe, it can be nice to just Drizzile a turn early for something and make sure it's able to evolve into Inteleon on the next turn. Okay, so Steve goes immediately for the double knockout. There is no Inkay left in play here. Matt is in huge trouble here. Those quick shootings and that Aqua Bullet have done the job here. Steve is down to 1 prize and is immediately looking very, very good here in this game 2. I really am not sure what Matt can do here. Matt extends the hand, and that is game 2. Steve takes the series 2-0. He was about one Rapidstrike card short of taking that game 2, but he just didn't quite have it, and the bench sniping ability of those Intellions, the quick shooting and the shady dealings have combined to help Steve seal this game 2 here. So Steve will likely move on to a win and in round here, where he will be able to make top 4 with a win in round 4. I believe Matt is probably out of contention, but props to Matt for bringing a unique pick like Malamar. Malamar is a lot of fun. Malamar, I think a lot of single prize decks are cool. I think if you play them, you're cool. Just didn't quite work out for Matt in this instance. So yeah, that was round 3. I'll see you in round 4.